Hi, you guys, and welcome back to the podcast.
We are the Karwells.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Sarah, and we are, as you know, Airbnb interior designers and investors. Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Catch Up with the Karwells. Today, we have Austin Palacios as a guest. I secretly, just before this episode started, asked him how to say his last name, so I didn't butcher it on the show. But Austin, we got to meet this past year, I guess it was in 2023, at an event we were at, and we were super impressed with the portfolio that he's got, the business that he started to build. And so, of course, as a natural progression to that, we are bringing him on the podcast to show him off to all of you guys. So, Austin, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, Sarah, Emily. It's good to see you both. I wish you guys were down here in sunny Florida with me, but we're going to have to reconnect soon in person. So thank you again for having me on.
Yeah, we wish we were down there too. Trust me.
Yeah, it is. For those of you guys listening, it is currently obviously winter here in Michigan, and Emily and I are dealing with a little bit of a sleet, snow, ice storm currently. So we are super envious of Austin being located in Florida. But Austin, as every episode goes on this podcast, we start each episode with an Airbnb horror story before we start digging into your story. So why don't you kick us off with an Airbnb story that you've gone through?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was probably 2023, I would say. It was around February time. So our high season down here in South Florida is usually December 15th through about April 15th. And with the majority of our major bookings coming between February and March. And I had bought a property over in an area called Hollywood, Florida, which is just south of Fort Lauderdale, if anybody's familiar with the geographics of Florida. And got the property up and running. Spent a lot of money on the design as well as the rehab, completely gutted the whole house. And so everything's going well. We launched that property probably in November time, getting some bookings coming in. And then around February, I'm out to dinner with some friends, and I get a text message from my business partner that just said, hey, look, something's going on at the Hollywood property. There's like ambulances on the Ring video camera, and we really don't know what's going on. So we messaged the guest, and we're asking, hey, what's the issue? What's going on? Is it like a noise complaint? What's causing the ambulances to be out there? And then the guest replied and said, hey, my toddler ended up falling into the actual pool, and he ended up falling in, and the paramedics are here to try to fix the situation. So I said, okay, so I'm a little worried at this point, not really sure what's going on, hoping the kid's okay. And so at that moment, I'm then going through the Ring video cameras and going over what happened prior to before the ambulances got there. And if you look on the Ring video cameras, you hear screaming, and then you see people walking out the house with like trays that look like some sort of like drugs, like as far as like marijuana or could be cocaine, multiple different things. So keeping that in mind, saved the video cameras, film. And then the next day, texting the guest, hey, what ended up happening? And unfortunately, that toddler ended up passing away and drowning inside the pool. So he was, I believe he was like 3 or 4 years old. And the parents they weren't paying attention. They were inside playing music, partying, having a good time. And unfortunately, that ended up happening. So I'm a little stressed out at this point. So I call Airbnb, tell them what ended up happening. So I'm not taking any chances for liability. And call my short-term rental liability insurance as well. Make sure everything's buttoned up. Airbnb completely shuts down my listing in the peak of high season. So February, March, shut down completely. I have no idea what's happening. All my bookings are canceled. And then over the next 9 weeks, we then have an insurance liability rep from Airbnb come out. They check everything, and then they approve us to be put back on the platform. But we missed out on those bookings for February and March, and that was kind of devastating for our bottom line as well as for that family too. And then we were on page 1 in Airbnb's algorithm, looking on rank breeze. And then by the time we went back on the platform, we were on page 12. So it took us a long time to be able to build back up, adjusting the listing, adjusting the photos, adjusting the description, doing anything that we possibly can to get past page 1. So that was the hardest experience that I faced from a business as well as a mental and an emotional situation since I started this journey back in 2019.
I don't even have words for that. That is crazy. But so were you able to like take the ring footage and submit it to your insurance and submit it to Airbnb and be like, this toddler was outside by itself? Like how did that process look for what you had to submit to the insurance to make sure that you were covered?
Yeah, so we actually didn't get to that point with the insurance. We were calling them to make sure that we were set in place, like that our policy was buttoned up, everything was good. So what ends up happening, it didn't get to that point. So it would have got to that point if the family had ended up trying to sue us for those issues, and then we would have submitted the Ring video cameras at that point.
Gotcha. Wow. So why did Airbnb, like from an Airbnb perspective, why did they proceed to end up shutting down your listing, even though it wasn't something that had anything to do with you as the host?
Airbnb has like some of the strictest policies now. So even if a party happens at the actual house and you tell Airbnb, hey, a party's happening, they'll shut down all of your listings on that account, not just that one listing, but every single listing that's tied to your host account. So until they go through their process and vet everything. So this happened to my business partner, Hannon and Scott. So they threw a party. They were making too much noise, and she told Airbnb, and they shut down her whole listing. So she was at a point that she was about to recreate every single listing again just to be able to get back on the platform. It's just they're very strict with their all their liability policies.
Wow. I mean, I have had, I guess we can kind of talk through this issue as well on the podcast now that it's been some time. I never like talking about issues as they're happening. But we had a cleaning team who verbally assaulted a guest one time. Like just showed up and started like screaming at the guest, like, get off the property, you're trespassing, like just being, I think the cleaners were on drugs, right? I think that's what we were dealing with. And Airbnb ended up unlisting our one property, but they didn't take down all of our properties. And then they called and it was like less than 24 hours and they had relisted it because we had like shown them that we had fired the cleaners, we had refunded the guests, like all the things. But like the thought of Airbnb shutting down all of your listings in the middle of peak season that makes up, I'm sure, like at least 30% of your revenue for the year.
Exactly.
Like our high season makes up 50% of our revenue for the year. That makes me want to vomit.
Yeah, no, we were charging like $950 per night in high season. Low season, we're charging like $275. So that just gives you an idea of how devastating that was. That was the point where me and my business partner are having to put in money every single month just to pay the mortgage and pay the debt and pay the expenses. It wasn't fun whatsoever.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know though, because like I didn't know that they would shut down all of the listings. And if you're a property management company, a lot of property management companies like require all of the listings to be under their account. And imagine like somebody else's listing got shut down and then you end up getting shut down because of that. That would be really frustrating. So the way that people want to set up their listings on Airbnb might look a little different knowing that fact.
Yeah. I was talking to Federico about this the other day, and so he has like an owner on there, and then he comes in as like a co-host. So if that ever does happen, that one gets shut down, then it doesn't mess up the other one. It's all about like how you structure your management.
Yeah. Wow, that just really goes to speak to like how important it is to have quality management on your properties. Because even like when I shifted over to handing the entire portfolio over to Federico earlier or I guess late in 2023, that's the first thing he did is he was like, we need to start a second Airbnb profile for you. Like you're at, you've got 5 properties listed right now. If one of those goes down, like we need to be able to shift it quickly. And so now I've got 2 Airbnb profiles. not like, and I had
Hmm.
never heard your specific story before. So hearing that story now with both you and Hannah having those things happen, I'm like, okay, let's shift this conversation to direct booking websites. Like, holy cow, absolutely not.
Exactly. Or you're just trying to survive off Verbo bookings, right? Verbo probably makes up maybe like 25% of all the bookings that come in down here, compared to like Airbnb, which takes up like the other 75.
Right, right. Same. I would say ours is about the same. You are the second person ever that we've had on this podcast who has had a death happen in their Airbnb.
Hmm.
And like that's an awful topic to cover, but that is the reality, right? It's
Yeah.
like it honestly makes me think about hotels because you've got a hotel that's operating at like 50x what we're operating at. They've got 50 times the people coming through their doors every single day. Like if we experience one death, let's say one death per property, right? Which is like probably obnoxious. It's not one death per property, but the amount of people that we have in here, like the odds are that that will happen at some point in time if you're a host long enough. It's like how many deaths are happening in hotels? Yet I've never seen like a body bag drug on a hotel
Yeah,
before.
no. Yeah, I was like, am I the only person that this has happened to? So I started like Googling like Airbnb pool death like in Florida, and it happens more common than we think. So definitely wasn't the first time, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredibly sad. We have a friend whose wife's sister had a kid die in a pool the same way, just like family party, and they're not like a family party that has drugs, like just a normal like
Hmm.
PG family party, and a toddler wandered out outside, and they didn't notice for 2 minutes, right? But it
Yeah.
only takes 2 minutes. Like, oh, that's awful. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but here you are on the other side, still rocking and rolling. Like
Yeah.
that is something to be said about you and your business partner and the tenacity that you guys have towards this business. So let's shift the conversation a little bit and let's tell everyone kind of where you're at in your journey, what you do, what you specialize in. Give us the elevator pitch.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So my name is Austin Palacios. I focus mainly on short-term rentals here in South Florida or Florida as a whole now. Currently, my portfolio from an investment standpoint, I have a long-term rental in Chicago. I have three short-term rentals here in Palm Beach County, all four bedrooms, pool houses. That one in Hollywood, it's a four-bedroom pool house as well. And then my latest acquisition was a three-bedroom that converted to a four-bedroom in a little area north of St. Pete called Seminole, Florida, that I bought probably 6 months ago. And I had a designer friend come in and do the whole thing. She did an incredible job. Her name is Bridget. It's Bridget Fitch. It's her Instagram
Love Bridget.
URL. So her and Blue, her boyfriend, came in town and they did my last place, and the bookings are insane. I wish I had found her sooner, and I wasn't trying to design stuff myself because my other properties compare nothing to what she did um, in that aspect. And then as interest rates continued to go up, I decided to start focusing on co-hosting back at the end of 2022. And I found that I needed a business partner that's really good at guest communication as well as owner communication and the operation side. So I started a co-hosting business with my business partner, Hannon Kim. Shout out to Hannon. You're great. Love you. Um, and I just really focused on acquiring the clients. That's my background. My background is within wealth management, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But really good at finding ways to acquire clients that are organic, as well as finding clients that are with larger property managers that aren't really doing the best job as possible. But yeah, that's a little nutshell of who I am and where I'm at now.
I will say this as well. Two things that I want to point out about that elevator pitch, and thank you for giving that. Is one, I always am going to reiterate that design pays for itself. You mentioning Bridget, I mean, if you're on social media and you're not following, it's Bridget Bitch. She is a fantastic interior designer for Airbnbs. But outside of that, I mean, when she is working alongside investors, just like we were when we were designing, and you're looking at the profit that you made before you invested in an interior designer and then the profit you make after, the designers pay for themselves. Like
Yeah,
whatever that design is, you're going to make that back 10x by
Yeah.
hiring a designer.
Yeah, it's stupid. I have bookings like 6 months out just because of her. And I'm charging like $800 in summertime, which isn't really our peak season here in Florida. It's absolutely insane.
Right. It's so stupid. It's like, and you don't know until you experience it, right? Like everyone's like, oh, sure, like I'm sure a nicer place I'll be able to charge like maybe $50 more a night or something like that. And it's like, no, you don't get it. Like the margin is until like once you invest in it, you will never not invest in it again. The other thing that I want to point out to our audience, you're being modest in the fact that you are talking through creative ways to bring on co-hosting clients. Because I deep dive your Instagram last night and this morning, re-upping on all the content, but I followed you for a minute, so we see all of your content, and the tips and tricks that you are giving in how to bring on co-hosting clients are brilliant. And they're not tips and tricks that other people are talking about. Specifically your video when you talked about reaching out to people who currently have Vacasa or Evolve as their host and kind of targeting them and knowing that they are leaving a lot of money on the table by having those people manage their properties. Chef's kiss. Brilliant. Brilliant, right? It's like there's money all around and you're able to point it out and kind of call it as you see it. So I think that the advice you're giving is invaluable to people who want to be co-hosts.
Thank you. Yeah, I did a lot of research. So my background was in wealth management before I got into investing in real estate. And so it was like pretty much my job to prospect for high net worth individuals from like 5 million to 30 million. So I had to figure out creative ways to get these people's phone numbers and convince them to switch over their banking relationship to my bank. So one thing I did back in the day is I found a list of this private jet hangar in Chicago, and I was able to get that information and then skip trace their information to be able to get their phone number and get in front of them. So I kind of carried everything that I learned in wealth management over to like co-hosting, just on a smaller scale, because I mean, it's pretty much the same type of people that you're communicating with, because if you have a vacation rental or you have some investment properties, you're most likely doing pretty well. So I kind of like utilize those same skills into like co-hosting. That makes sense.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Well, can you clarify something? Because we get asked all the time if there's a difference between a property management company and a co-host, and kind of like, can you clarify what the difference is, if you see a difference or if you see them as the same thing? Because we're asked that all the time, and I think those two terms are used interchangeably a lot in this industry. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So property management is pretty much you're doing absolutely everything. So guest communication, owner communication, cleaner communication. You're mainly taking all the money into a trust account if you're doing property management, and then you're paying out the owner separately at the end of the month, usually like for the 10th or the 15th day, depending on how your accounting's set up. You're doing owner statements as well. With co-hosting, it's mainly just you have an owner that has their account, and then you go on as a co-host. You're managing their communication, managing their cleaner communication, and then they're usually taking all the money, and then you're sending them a bill at the end of the month. Usually, I recommend like an ACH payment. Have them go ahead and agree that you can pull their card for the amount once you send the owner statement, so you're not waiting to get paid. But those are the main reasons. So me personally, when I say co-hosting, I usually refer to like full-on property management, but those terms are used interchangeably.
Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. I've always kind of wondered the same thing, because property management sounds a lot more official, right? Yeah. It sounds like they're, running the show. And you guys are to a certain degree, right? But yeah, like hiring on a property manager or a co-host does not make these properties completely passive. Like you still, as the owner, have a lot of managerial roles that you're still holding. And so I feel like when people call it property management, they automatically assume, and of course I get like a lot of the backlash that Federico is experiencing managing not only my properties, but everybody else, when he's complaining about how everybody else is expecting him to function. They're expecting him to handle from A to Z. And that's not the reality of the property manager's job. Like at that point, like why wouldn't the property manager just own the building at that point? Like
Exactly.
you're maintaining everything. So from your perspective, where do you draw that line? Like if you are setting expectations for somebody who is looking to bring on a co-host, what exactly are your roles? Where do you kind of draw that line of this is my job versus this is your job still?
Yeah, so whenever I'm talking to a prospect on the call, I pretty much tell them it's full service property management. Um, so the fee that I usually charge is between like 20 and 25%. So I tell them, hey, look, I'm gonna pretty much do everything for you. The one thing that we don't do, because we mainly do remote hosting, is if something does pop up and you want us to go over there and I don't know, measure something that you're gonna order, it's gonna be like a $50 fee, a service fee for somebody to go out there. And then depending on which market we have, we usually find somebody on like TaskRabbit or Thumbtack that becomes our runner. We send them over to that location and we just build that back to the actual client for them. But as far as like the guest communication, client communication, taxes purposes, we file the taxes for them. We communicate with the cleaner for them. Any little thing that you could possibly think of as far as property management, I do that. I know some people, though, they set up their co-hosting business where they're just communicating with the guests for the owners and they're charging a lower fee. I think if you just add on those extra services, the increase in revenue that you'll bring in is more than worth it as long as you have your systems in place.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. What about ongoing repairs and like seasonal flips, for example? Like our properties, we are always updating them in some way, shape, or form. Furniture breaks, or it goes from winter to summer, and all of a sudden now we have to put out all of our patio furniture, all of our kayaks, our paddle boats, like all of that. From that perspective, are you still pushing on the owner to kind of coordinate, or are you getting a giant list of everything that needs to happen for that property in between seasons, and then you're coordinating that as well as a portion of your services?
Yeah, no, so we definitely coordinate that. And the one thing I will say is your cleaner is your best friend. So just organizing with your cleaner, I think a lot of people don't realize, but cleaners make like, they're like the people who sold the shovels during the gold rush. If you think about it, they're making a lot of money for a few hours every single turn. So I think they're more than happy to do the small things. Like for example, I had a property that I manage. The owner wanted to get like a decibel reader for the noise, and I asked the cleaner if they could just install it for them and then upload the app and then just with the login credentials. So the cleaner mainly handles all that stuff for you or for us, and then yeah, it's pretty seamless.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that that's an area that requires, and we've learned this with even handing off our own properties to property management, the level of coordination and the amount of time that it takes to coordinate all of that information to a property management company and then to a new cleaner. That's a heavy lift. Like I think that maybe I anticipated, or I've watched other people anticipate, like they reach a point of overwhelm with their own property that they've been managing themselves. They want to hand it off to somebody else, and they're like, they want to dump it, right? Yeah. They're like, I'm carrying all of this responsibility. A lot of people still have a 9-to-5, and they're like, somebody has to take this over. And so it gets absolutely dumped on you. And the reality is that like you as the owner still have to be semi-plugged in for an era with these property managers to make sure that they can run it at the same level of quality that you ran it before. So I always like to include that just because if you're listening and you're considering bringing on a co-host, like please know that these people are not magic workers per se. They just need you to be plugged in for a little while we transition over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big thing now that the market shifted from 2021, you can pretty much just throw a property up there, set your pricing on Price Labs, and don't really have to go back to Price Labs to look at it. But now as the market shifts, as co-hosts and as property managers, we need to make sure that we're adjusting that pricing every single day, every other day, at least once a week, because a lot of the time, the biggest headaches that you'll see in co-hosting is whenever the owner is not making money. So if you're not on top of your revenue management, then you're going to get a lot of headaches. I call them HMO, high maintenance owners. A lot of high maintenance owners or HMOs are going to start popping up for sure. So something to keep in mind.
It's me. I'm a high maintenance owner.
There you go.
Look, I think, and Feta and I will joke about this as well. I am a high maintenance owner, but I'm also willing to open up my pocketbook. So like,
There you go.
I want to be extra, but I'm willing to pay for extras.
I agree. No, I'm completely on board too. If I had a property man, like if something gets like needs to get fixed, like for example, like it's been a year since you replaced like the patio furniture down here, and you got it from Amazon, and the pillows are faded. Just pay the $800 because you're just gonna make that back in season, like, or you're gonna get a bad review, or people are gonna be like, this isn't luxury. Like, what's going on? Why am I paying for this?
Right, right. I totally agree.
Hmm.
So you talked about at the beginning of this that you were originally investing and primarily focused on that, and then when interest rates started rising, you shifted into this co-host model. When you think about, this year, everybody's suggesting that interest rates are going to go back down.
Hmm.
When you think about kind of where we're at in the economy, now that you've done both, are you more so focused on still growing the co-hosting regardless of what interest rates are doing? Or do you see it as something that you'll kind of shift back into investing and you've got the co-host model automated enough that you could step away a little bit to go back to purchasing?
Yeah, definitely. So since I already have the systems and the funnels in place, that set up in the beginning, I have co-host deals come to me probably bi-weekly now, just organically. Like for example, I had somebody reach out to me yesterday. They were with a prior property manager. They hated me. They found my website, and then they were like, "Hey, I have two properties. Would you mind taking these on?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So right now, as far as the systems are in place already, the organic traffic, the funnels are in place. So I'll keep on taking on new co-hosting clients. But we're shifting and we're partnering with another co-host that I'm pretty sure you guys know that we mentioned earlier. So we're going to continue growing that side of the business. But I do want to start focusing more on investing moving into this year. I'm hoping that by like Q3, Q4, interest rates are down at least 100 basis points or so, and then the numbers start penciling out more. But as more clients come in, I don't want to say no. I still want to add value to people that are not having a good experience with the prior property manager.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you have these people coming to you bi-weekly now. So like you've
Mm-hmm.
created this reputation for yourself. So you're getting a lot of clients coming to you. For somebody who's just looking at getting started in co-hosting, how do you like reach out, get your first client? Like what were the steps that you think are the best to take to get your first one to kind of start
Yep.
creating a reputation for yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So the best way to scale because it takes time to build these funnels and build a brand for yourself to have people start reaching out to you organically. But the fastest way to scale, and we touched on in the beginning, is through Vacasa, Evolve, and large property managers. So just to give you some background on the numbers from Vacasa, and you guys already know this, like I've never stayed at a Vacasa property, but if you read the reviews or if you talk to the owners, it's always around communication. You can't get somebody on the line from Vacasa, and then one person I talked to in June down here when I was converting him over, he's like, I haven't had a booking in 6 weeks. I know it's slow, but I haven't had a booking in 6 weeks. I'm just like, dude, that's absolutely insane. And it's mainly because of the fact of what I touched on before. When the market shifted, you need to be adjusting that revenue every single week or every other day, or you're not going to be getting those bookings. And Vacasa just isn't doing that. So what I did in the very beginning when I was scaling, I scaled to like 13 clients in I think it was like 60 days. And I did that by targeting the cost and evolve clients. So what I did is I went on their website. I filtered by my ideal property, pool homes, 4 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms or bigger, and I pulled that information. And then I was able to pull the addresses for them through a software that I use. And then once I had those addresses, I then skip traced those addresses to get those phone numbers. So I was just cold calling these owners of Vacasa Evolve clients. So I was just like, hey, look, how's your experience with Vacasa? I'm a property manager in this market. I'm just trying to get some feedback because they reached out to me to potentially partner. I just want to make sure I'm making the right decision. And that just opens the door. The floodgates open. They're just like, don't do it. Vacasa's terrible. Evolve's terrible. I haven't been able to get them on the line for a month now or something like that. So that like allows you to then say, hey, look, well, I don't really know if I'm gonna like potentially partner with Vacasa or Evolve, but if you're willing, if it would help, we could just set up a call maybe sometime next week, and I can tell you a little bit about like what I do. Would you be open to that? And just like that line just sets up for the sales call, and then allows you to present how you do things different than Vacasa and Evolve.
Yeah, that's so smart. But I guess like if you don't have any experience, say,
Yep.
like you don't have your own properties,
Mm-hmm.
and those people are going to be like, I would assume they're going to be pushing back and say, if you don't have any experience, how are you going to do better than Vacasa or Evolve or whatever else? What would you say to that
Yep.
if you have no prior experience? Because there are a lot of people who like want to get into co-hosting because it's the
Mm-hmm.
free way to get into Airbnb, and so I know that like that would be a question that would scare me going into those
Yeah,
conversations.
of course.
So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is just your confidence when you go into the call, right? So knowing the market, knowing how to talk about Airbnbs. As long as you've done your prior experience, listen to a ton of podcasts, listen to a ton of YouTube videos, you should be able to talk about it. The majority of the time, these owners aren't really going to ask you how many properties you have in under management. Like very rarely, I found maybe 10% of the time they ask you how long you've been doing this for, what's your background, so on and so forth. So I really wouldn't get tied into that. Where the questions like those pop up is whenever you're stumbling across your words. If they ask you a question about, all right, well, what are the fees? Just say 20%, 25%, whatever it is, whenever you're getting started. Don't try to add like $500 onboarding fee. You want to cause as much less friction as possible in that initial sales call just to get them on board. That's the biggest piece of advice I could say. Don't really get tied up on if you don't have any properties. That question usually is not going to pop up.
Yeah, I love that. I think I giggled when you were talking about sourcing your properties through Vacasa and Evolve because, of course, I think it's brilliant that you're targeting like the management companies that we know are offering subpar service across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about the fact that you are like specifically hunting down the nicest properties.
Yeah, I don't want any of the ugly properties, Sarah. They can keep them. They can keep the properties that do $75 a night.
It's so good though. It's just like, I mean, again, I always reference back to Federico because that is my only like in-depth exposure to co-hosting because we've never offered it, and so I get to like adjacently hear the nightmare stories. And he started with managing like 100 arbitrage units that were all just absolute crap, right? And like the stuff that he would have to deal with those crap properties was obnoxious. And so to see you walk in not having any co-hosting experience and going straight for the 4-bed 5-bath houses was hilarious to me.
Yeah, man. So I got kind of lucky because originally I was targeting long-term rentals on the market, and that like worked out decently, but it wasn't like as fast as growth as I wanted to see. And I was having this agent show me this house, and he was asking me questions. He was like, "Hey, what do you guys charge for like if you have like a wedding of like 50 people?" I was like, "Well, we haven't really done that, but I would just charge like by guests after a certain amount of guests, and then just do it that way." And he was just like, "Oh, okay, interesting." Well, he ends up calling me like 2 weeks later. He's like, "Hey, Austin, I have these 2 properties, and I'm not having my property manager. Would you consider like coming by and taking a look at them?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, man." So I came by, and they were the 2 highest grossing properties in all of West Palm Beach. They slept 30 people. They were like, it was a compound, and it just kind of fell in my lap. And I was just like, dude, I don't want anything like subpar to this, or like, like properties that don't have pools or like that. If you're just disciplined on what you're trying to target in the very beginning, that's all you should be going after, and then your revenue is going to increase dramatically if you focus on the higher end properties.
Yeah, having a standard for your properties. One of the stories Fede told is he, on the Ring camera, somebody's running naked through the hallways of the apartment complex that he was managing. And I'm like, what do you even do about that?
Yeah, no, I'm just, no. Like, he was managing the units that I had exited out of after I had gone through trying to run properties in this crazy apartment complex in downtown Dallas. And my complex, it was the one that had gotten robbed. And then, like, right after I had refurnished it after it getting robbed, somebody put a bullet hole through my door. And both of us at that point in time, we're done with this crowd.
Wow. Wow. That reminds me of Chicago. Bullets flying everywhere there. I can I can tell you a crazy story too that happened to me in Chicago around bullets. guys want?
Look, we'll have to circle back on that one, unless it's Airbnb related.
Okay,
Let's cover
okay.
it here.
All right, all good.
So, now when you're thinking about, like, for example, in Florida, you're talking about the interest rates kind of
Mhm.
canceling out the ability to buy something profitable right now. Is that the case kind of across Florida? Like, with interest rates where they're at and where competition is at, there's just nothing that really pencils with where we're at currently?
Yeah, so things definitely pencil out down here in certain small markets that people haven't really found. So for example, that property that I bought 6 months ago, bought it for $600,000. It should gross around $140,000. So those numbers make sense for me. For me to like be able to, when I buy a property, I want to be able to like net at least $4,000 after like expenses and after the debt. But what I see a lot of the times down here in Florida, people that are working with agents that aren't well versed in short-term rentals, is the fact that they're putting them in homes where, as a short-term rental, they're breaking even and they're not making any cash flow, right? So it's just making sure you have the right team in place as far as like having the agent. But to answer your question, those still do pencil out, but they're not like the crazy numbers that we were seeing back in like 2020, 2021, where you're having 3% interest rates and for a 3-bedroom pool home, your mortgage was like $2,400. Yeah, we just don't really see that as much here. So it's a lot more difficult to do, but it's still possible. So 100%.
Right. Okay. That's good. What about regulations in Florida as well? I'm kind of going on a Florida tangent because I'm comparing it to
Yeah.
Michigan, of course, but is regulation down there getting any tighter? Are you experiencing that across any of your properties? Are any of them getting shut down by municipalities changing their tone towards short-term rentals?
Yeah, definitely. So Florida passed this regulation a few years back that pretty much just says as long as a town or a city didn't ban short-term rentals before, they can't ban them moving forward. They can just make the requirements a lot more tight. So, for example, what that looks like in Hollywood, um, they have like 4 different inspectors come out. So one for electric, one for plumbing, and then one for I don't know. I don't remember. There's 4 different people that come out. So every single person has to go and check that, make sure everything's good, and then somebody else from the city of Hollywood comes out and checks everything as well. And then before you're able to launch the actual property on Airbnb and Verbo, you have to have that green light from the city. I've seen that happen a lot in multiple different cities here. And then what happens if you try to get around that? They'll find you. They have some software now that they can go online, see all the Airbnbs that are listed, and then they'll find you. I don't know how much it is, like per day. It's like $500 per day that your listing is live. So that's what I've seen.
Yikes, $500 a day. Oh, we're going through that process right now with one of our properties where the township said it was fine, and everybody else said it was fine, and then the county just called us, and the county was like, "Hey, we're establishing a permitting system. You've got to go through this process, yada yada." And it's like retroactively, right? So like the permitting system didn't exist before, we've been operating, and now it exists, and so now we have to go through the permitting process. And I'm like, nervous because we didn't, we're done with renovations. Like, what if there is something that they come out and they're like, oh, by the way, your electrical isn't up to par, or your hot tub's not located, whatever, who knows what those issues could be. But now we're like feeling anxious about opening up that can of worms and dealing with people in the city.
Definitely, definitely, that makes sense. If you guys want, I can talk more about the funnels that I set in place to have people find me organically as well. That'll help for the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So one thing that you're gonna want to do is set up a website. I usually utilize like Wix.com. Pretty easy. They have the foundation set up already for you, and then you can just change the information as far as like who's the owner of the property management, what you guys focus on, and then the key thing that you want to keep in mind is your Google reviews. So you want to have your Google reviews tied to your property management website as well, and you want to focus on keywords in that market. So Airbnb property management, X, Y, and Z city, different things like that. And then if you're just starting and you really don't have any clients, what you can potentially end up doing is you can have some friends or family members leave your reviews too, just so it boosts you in the algorithm. But I've never spent any money on like SEO or marketing companies like that. If you just do those small things, people will start finding you, as well as writing a blog post about like what you're doing in that market every single week. So you can have Chat GDP or Chat GPT, however it's pronounced, write those blogs for you and then post it in your website. What's going to end up happening is you're going to start ranking higher on Airbnb's algorithm and closer to page one. So that's a great funnel that you guys can set in place for sure.
So sorry, I was thinking that you were talking about your property management company. You're talking about your properties themselves. This helps them on Airbnb if you create a website for your property and
No,
use Google reviews.
yeah, no. So I was talking about for the property management company. So like
Oh,
owners that have properties that they're looking for property management, they can utilize that technique, and then people will start finding you through that way.
brilliant.
Mhm.
Now that you've got that set up, you're getting like 2 properties a week, right? Are you doing any cold calling at all anymore on sourcing new property management?
Um, Not
Or
really.
no?
I mean, every now and then I'll go on Vacasa and Evolve and take a look to see if there's any luxury properties that some buffoon decided to have Vacasa and Evolve manage. And then I'll give them a call, ask them how it's going. But mainly I'd rather just have them come in organically, just take the phone call, see what they're looking for, and then see if they fit the brand. And then if they do, just onboard them from there.
When you say fit the brand, obviously when you were, cold calling properties that were on Vacasa that were big,
Mhm.
that kind of fit your ideal clientele, you were kind of handpicking your clients. And now that they're coming in organically, are you seeing that they'll like get on your website and they'll see the other properties that you're managing and they can kind of make that assessment themselves and they're like, oh, this kind of matches the vibe of my property? Or are you having to turn quite a few people away because they're coming to you with crappy properties thinking that, it would qualify?
Yeah, 100%. Like I turn people away all the time. If they're not going to meet my revenue requirement, if they're not going to have like a boho, coastal, pool home feel, it's just not worth my time. I know what like works in this market, and I don't want you to turn it into an HMO if you're not hitting the revenue that you want to. Like for example, I had an owner come to me the other day, and it was like a 2 bedroom, 1 bath house here in Lake Worth, and it was probably only going to gross like $45,000. And I was just like, you guys, like honestly, this kind of just makes sense for you to turn this into a long-term rental. You're going to save on expenses. You're not going to pay me 20%. You can pay somebody if you want a property manager 8%, and it makes sense for you. I'm just trying to be as completely honest and blunt with them as possible because I don't want to onboard them and then after a while they're just like, hey, look, they come to the realization of what I could have told them in the beginning. Hey, this makes more sense as a long-term rental. We're going to go ahead and transition. Because then what happens is I spend all that time onboarding your property, getting familiar with the property, and making sure it's performing at the best of its ability as possible. And I'd rather just end things right then from the beginning.
When you're onboarding these properties that are coming from Vacasa and Evolve, we talked about how the reviews are not great when
Mm-hmm.
typically they like talk about not great guest communication. What's your strategy, or do you have a strategy around getting the reviews up? Like if it's at a lower star rating and you know that it can do better, are you suggesting that they start a new listing with you, or are you just working to get the star rating as high as it can possibly get?
Yeah, no. So I have every single owner, or I create a new listing for every single owner whenever they're transitioning from Vacasa and Evolve, because as you know this, anything below like a 4.85 is terrible, and your ranking is going to be probably on page 6 or below. So I just tell them, I was like, hey, look, we need to create a brand new listing because what's going to happen whenever we create that listing, Airbnb is going to push you in the algorithm in the beginning, and then we're going to focus on only getting 5-star reviews, and the more 5-star reviews you get, the higher that you're going to rank in that algorithm. So we just really need to create that brand new listing from the very beginning, get those reviews in as quickly as possible so that we can get you back to page one. Because if I was to take over a Vacasa Evolve client on page like 10, it could take me months before I get you closer to page. I probably won't even be able to get you to page one, to be honest. Maybe page 3 if we're lucky.
Right. Right, that makes so much sense. And I think, is it not the case that Vacasa and Evolve require you to like list on their Airbnb profile? So
Yeah.
it's like if you want to split off from them anyway, like you don't have, like the reviews aren't yours, they're Vacasa's and Evolve's.
Yeah, exactly. So like one thing that I'll do in the beginning, since they're already with Cohosting and Evolve, is you can take those photos, you can download those photos, create a new listing, go ahead and upload those photos onto onto your new Airbnb listing, and then go live. Just mark off the days on the Cost and Evolve calendar that are already booked, unless you want to tell Evolve, hey, look, I'm selling this property or I'm taking over this property myself again. Then they can cancel those for you, and then you can try to rebook them onto your new Airbnb listing, or you can just go through until your last listing is with the Cost and Evolve, and then just have them mark off the calendar from the day forward that you take over as a manager.
That makes sense. Yeah. When we first launched the mentorship last year, that was by far the thing that we noticed immediately, was that all of our mentees who had properties that were running, the number one problem that they had was that they had bad property managers.
Yeah.
Like we would plug in, we would look, and we were like, oh, like, no, this is like, if you haven't managed yourself and you haven't experienced quality management, then maybe you don't know what to expect. You don't know the level of customer service that some of these other operators are providing that you are competing against.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've seen that time and time again. And so from your perspective, and this is going to be our last question as we kind of wrap up here, if someone was looking not to start a co-hosting business themselves, but if they were looking to bring on a manager, a property manager, or a co-host, how do they spot a good one versus a bad one, outside of the obvious of it being Vacasa and Evolve versus everyone else?
Yeah, stay away from Vacasa and Evolve, you guys. And I'll give like a little nugget if you decide to target Vacasa and Evolve clients like after I answer this question. But the main thing that you want to focus on are the reviews on the actual Airbnb account itself. So I don't want to be with any manager where they have any properties that are lower than 4.9 rating on any property across the board. And then I would also take a look at their actual calendar, see how booked off they are. So a secret hack that you guys can potentially use whenever you're vetting a property manager is you can go on Price Lab and you can choose a market, choose the bedroom type, and then you can see how far out what the occupancy rate is supposed to be from like 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. And then you cross-reference that with their calendar. All right. So are they meeting the market standard, or are they higher than the market standard? Because a lot of people can like BS you, right, at the end of the day and just lie. But the numbers don't lie. So look on Price Lab, review their reviews, ask them if you can actually talk to an owner that had their property listed with them, and then vet that person that you're actually talking to. All right, is this actually your property? Like, can you describe the property to me? Just get very granular in the actual questions that you're asking that person, just so you make sure that they're not actually like calling like a friend or having a friend talk to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. The cross-referencing of the occupancy immediately. Like, I mean, maybe it would be a little complicated for someone who had never like worked in Price Labs before or whatever the case may be, but especially as someone who's like familiar with Price Labs, that would take me 15 minutes to cross-reference and see if they were beating or not the market standards. So that keeps them honest.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You got to see through all the BS at the end of the day. You don't know who you're actually talking to.
There's so much of it. Real estate comes with an ego across the board. So, well, Austin, this has been incredibly insightful. Honestly, I learned a thing or two on this call, and I love when that happens. So we appreciate you coming on. Do you want to plug where people can find you if they're interested in learning how to co-host or hiring a co-host as well?
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys are looking for a way to acquire co-hosting clients, feel free to reach out to me. I really don't focus on the management side of things. Just if you're trying to grow the co-hosting business from an acquisition standpoint, I can help you. The best way to reach me is through Instagram. My name is Austin, Austin, and then 2 underscores, and then my last name, which is Palacios, Palacios. And feel free to reach out.
Amazing. And we will have all of your stuff tagged below all of these videos as well. So for our listeners, if you didn't catch that, of course, go to the bio of this and you can find him on socials. But thank you so much for coming on and talking all things co-hosting. And to our listeners, thanks again for joining us. We'll see y'all next time.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Thanks, Sarah.